Hello, Semester 3. Greetings once again. I welcome you all to today's online lecture on An Introduction to Goldsmith's She Stoops to Conquer. Primarily in this lecture, we shall be focusing on the context of Goldsmith's well-known comedy, She Stoops to Conquer, The Mistakes of a Knight. So, as I mentioned, in my earlier lecture on an introduction to drama, and as we were, going through the history of drama and updating ourselves till, the mid 18th century, we realized that, when Goldsmith brought out She Stoops to Conquer, and it was first staged in March 1773. Now you have to realize the context, you have to realize the way that drama stood at that point of time. So we know that, the Restoration drama, the Restoration comedy of manners particularly, had been much in receipt of criticism because of the immorality and, because of the debauchery that it was supposed to have portrayed. And this had resulted in the cult of another comedy which was very well known in the 18th century as the Sentimental Comedy. So the Sentimental Comedy was a genre which insisted on sentimentalizing human relationships, and it focused so much on virtue, that the very experience of comedy became jaded. So comedy, which is supposed to evoke light laughter, became a very tedious form in the hands of these sentimental comedy writers, where tragedy would be indiscriminately mixed with comedy, and it remained a comedy only in the sense of having a happy ending, in the sense of having a non-complicated ending where everything is resolved very easily. So it was against this cult of the sentimental comedy that Goldsmith's She Stoops to Conquer made a very profound statement. And before March 1773, you realize that in January 1773, Goldsmith brings out an essay that is entitled An Essay on Theatre, where he offers a comparison between the sentimental comedy and what he calls the laughing comedy. So the laughing comedy would be the usual comedy, would be the comedy of manners that was intended to provoke fun and laughter in the audience. So in this comparison, Goldsmith talks at length about his idea of comedy, about how in the ancient times, in the classical times, comedy and tragedy were expected to be two distinct genres. In fact, the difference between them had been so strict that writers who wrote tragedy did not at all attempt comedy, and writers who wrote comedy, did not at all write tragedy. So the distinction in form had been very strict during the classical period. And although Shakespeare later on brought tragedy and comedy together in many of his romances, in his well-known tragi-comedies, yet comedy had remained a light-hearted play which was intended to bring out, the foibles of the society, which was intended to make people laugh, as it was intended, to present a mild criticism of society. However, the sentimental comedy had completely brought in a different idea into the structure of the comedy. So the sentimental comedy was a moralistic genre. It was what you would call, a didactic form of literature that was intended to emphasize moral goodness upon the audience. So the general fare of sentimental comedy would be extremely virtuous characters. So characters would be more virtuous than was realistic, than was actually palatable by the audience. And then there would be a lot of weeping. So the general plot would be a character starting out, on the wrong foot, and then somewhere down the line he or she would realize his follies, and then he or she would mend his ways. So in a way it would be very typical to the morality plays of the medieval period, of the medieval and the early Renaissance period. So it was intended to impress the innate goodness of man upon the audience. So man, it was believed, was innately good, and it was our moral human duty to bring out this innate goodness in us. And the sentimental comedy harped so much upon this innate goodness that the very experience of the comedy was becoming tarnished. So Goldsmith has in this elaborate essay, which there are some critics who say that this essay had been very strategically brought out a few months before She Stoops to Conquer was, ready and ready for stage performance. Now we do not really know whether this was strategic enough, but then the sentimental comedy had been a genre which was not lacking in critics, not only in England but even in the continent as a whole. In France, for instance, Voltaire had lashed out against the sentimental comedy. He had called it the tradesman's tragedy instead of, accepting it as a comedy. Again, the very popular French term for the sentimental comedy was the comédie larmoyant. The comédie larmoyant would be translated as larmoyant in French is weeping or tearful. So it would be the weeping comedy or the tearful comedy, which was a form which was already receiving much criticism at this time. So we do not know whether Goldsmith's essay was a strategy of promoting She Stoops to Conquer. We have no way of knowing this. But then when She Stoops to Conquer was written, its reception was quite debatable. For instance, you realize when you read the text that Goldsmith dedicates the entire text to Dr. Samuel Johnson because of the immense encouragement that he had always received from Dr. Johnson. And it is on Dr. Johnson's insistence that a prologue was written by the very well-known actor of the period, David Garrick. And it was performed again by another very well-known actor, that is Woodward. So these people, who were important figures in the English theatre at that time, though, under Johnson's insistence, they lent their support to the play, yet they were extremely apprehensive about being directly associated with it. For example, Woodward, who reads out the prologue in She Stoops to Conquer, was intended to have played the part of Tony Lumpkin in the play. But then, although initially he had agreed, later he backed out because he was very uncertain of the play's success, of the play's reception at all, let alone success. And though he consents, he capitulates to Dr. Johnson by agreeing to perform the prologue on stage, he refuses absolutely. He dissociates himself from the play as a whole and refuses to play the part of Tony Lumpkin, which is later performed by somebody else. Similarly, David Garrick himself, who wrote the prologue for She Stoops to Conquer, he was very, very apprehensive about letting the play being performed in his own theatre. So, the reception of She Stoops to Conquer, the very possibility of the existence of a play like She Stoops to Conquer in an era when the sentimental comedy was ruling high, was something which was extremely questionable. So we do not really know whether Goldsmith's essay on the theatre was intended to be a strategy of self-promotion. However, we realize that Goldsmith does a very important service to literature at a time when, the muse is really sick, the muse is really dying, when laughter was really, being wiped out from the stage by this flourishing cult of sentimentality. And She Stoops to Conquer strikes, just the right note at the right time. So if you read the play, you realize that it is basically a comedy of errors. The very idea, the very plot is based on a mistaken identity. And this series of mistakes, continues throughout the play. So the very central thematic device of the play would be the error or the technique of mistaken identity, or the misrepresentation and misinterpretation on the part of the various characters in the play. So it's a very interesting, it's a very layered play, it's a very layered comedy in the sense that at any particular time, the set of characters who are there visible before you on the stage at any particular time, all these characters, they have a differential knowledge equation. So not every one of them is aware of everything that is going on, in the same way as the audience is aware. So the audience from beginning to end is in the know of what is going to happen. However, the characters, because of the differential, knowledge equations, they are interacting at cross purposes with one another. So there are multiple narratives which are going on at the same time, and it is this, this polyphony, this polyphony of voices in the text, and it is also this multiplicity of viewpoints that can be found at any particular time. So if you would, kind of take a screenshot of the play at any particular time, you realize that there are a lot of confusions on the stage at any point of time. And it is these confusions, it is these, mistaken representations, these mistaken interpretations, which work together to create a very, very interesting story. Again, the language is, Goldsmith emphasizes in his essay on the theatre that the comedy is intended to be a presentation of the low life. Just like the tragedy was intended to be in ancient times a representation of high life, comedy should be a representation of low life. And in keeping with his ideas, he tries to project, the low middle class life of rural London on the stage, of rural England on the stage, and the contrast that is presented between, the town and the country, the contrast that is presented between a rural mode of living, a country mode of living, and the fashionable world of London, which though not physically portrayed in the play, makes its appearance quite felt through the character of Mrs. Hardcastle, who is, who is very fond of being a fashionable elite from the so-called, so-called urban society. And these newcomers, these people who are coming in, that is Marlowe and his friend Hastings, so they are coming in from London society. And the way, this series of interactions take place, the way, there are two different cultures in the play which are interacting with one another, the high culture, the low culture, the aristocratic culture of the Hardcastle household, and then you have Tony Lumpkin and his band of, low class, the in crowd. So the various, cultural registers that operate in the play make it a very interesting, study, not only in art, but also, very interesting anthropological study that tells you a lot about the 18th century English society. So I believe that, She Stoops to Conquer remains, it was and it remains one of the most enduring works of literature because of the very genuine kind of humor, the very spontaneous kind of humor that it inspires, and that has, followed its reception in theaters almost since its very first performance. So even today, performances of She Stoops to Conquer, like Shakespeare's Taming the Shrew, would be, widely welcomed, would be something that every audience in every part of the world would be capable of enjoying. Now, today I think I would like you to read along with me the prologue of Goldsmith's She Stoops to Conquer. So I expect you to have a copy of the text. I have a copy of the text on my Kindle, and we hope that together, we will be able to read the prologue and to set the tone for the play that is to, follow us very soon. So here goes my reading. Yes, so here goes, my reading of the prologue. I expect you to have your text in your hands. I have my text here, and together I think we will do some justice to the prologue. So this is Enter Mr. Woodward, dressed in black, and he's holding a handkerchief to his eyes. So Woodward, as I said, was a very important, very important actor, theatrical actor at that time. And he comes in a mourning costume. As I also mentioned, he was intended to play Tony Lumpkin in the play, but then he refused because he was afraid, that the play wouldn't do well. So he wasn't very willing to associate himself with the play, though he does present the prologue, because all of this was, kind of arranged by Dr. Samuel Johnson, who was very fond of Goldsmith and had, and was determined to promote him. So enter Mr. Woodward, who is dressed in black. He's dressed in a mourning costume, and he's holding a handkerchief to his eyes. He's crying, he's mourning, he's lamenting. "Excuse me, sirs, I pray. I can't yet speak. I'm crying now and have been all the week. It's not alone this mourning suit, good masters. I have that within for which there are no plasters." So the tone is clear that this, this figure on stage is in mourning. He is choked. He's choked with tears. He's choked with lamentation. He cannot speak. He has been mourning all the week. And it's not just that he's wearing a mourning suit. This mourning suit is not just a mere appearance. But then there is something within him. There is a grief within him for which there is no cure, for which there are no plasters, for which there is no way of healing, this grief, this tragedy that is there within him. And he says, "Pray, would you know the reason why I'm crying? The comic muse, long sick, is now a dying. And if she goes, my tears will never stop. For as a player, I can't squeeze out one drop." So what does he say here? He says, would you like to know the reason why I'm crying? I already told you I'm sad, I'm sorrowful. And the reason I'm sorrowful is that the comic muse, which has been sick for quite a long time, is now actually dying. So the comic muse could be, one of the Greek muses, or one of the 9 Greek muses. Thalia was the muse for comedy. And probably the comic muse could be a reference. It could be a classical allusion to Thalia. So Thalia, is on her sick bed. The muse of comedy, the goddess of comedy, is on her sick bed. She has been sick for quite a long while. She has been ailing for quite a long while. And now she's actually dying. And if she goes, if she really dies, my tears will never stop. I'll never stop crying. I'll never get over my grief if she dies. Because as a player, I can't squeeze out one drop. Because as a player, as the kind of actor that I am, I'm not able to squeeze out a single drop of tear. So if the muse of comedy dies, how will I survive? How will my trade survive? Because I cannot be a tragedy actor. I can only perform comedies. I'm suited for that particular genre. So how would I survive, if the muse of comedy herself died? I'm not capable of performing anything else but a comedy. I'm undone. That's all. Shall lose my bread. I would rather, but that's nothing, lose my head. When the sweet maid is laid upon the bier, Shutter and I shall be chief mourners here. So he says, I'm going to lose my bread. I'm going to lose my livelihood altogether. Actors like me, because of the loss of comedy, are going to be wiped out of the stage. So our careers will come to an end once comedy goes. I would rather lose my head, than lose my livelihood like this. And when the sweet maid, that is when Thalia, the muse of comedy, is finally laid upon the bier, she's laid upon the funeral bed, Shutter and I shall be the chief mourners there. So then Ned Shutter or Edward Shutter, was another popular actor at that time, and he was actually playing Hardcastle in the play. So he says that once comedy dies, Shutter and I shall be the chief mourners there, because we are 2 people who cannot perform tragedy. To her, that is to comedy. So to her, to comedy, a mawkish drab of spurious breed, who deals in sentimentals, will succeed. Poor Ned and I are dead to all intents. We can as soon speak Greek as sentiments. So he says, and once when comedy dies, once when the muse of comedy dies, what shall be left behind? Who shall succeed to this muse of comedy? Well, she shall be succeeded by a mawkish drab of spurious breed. Spurious? Mixed, mingled. adulterated, mongrel. So, comedy shall be superseded by a different kind of, theatrical performance altogether. And this would be the sentimental comedy. Who deals in sentimentals will succeed. So once, the laughing comedy dies, once natural humor dies, it will only, give way to the sentimental comedy. So the sentimental comedy will triumph. And then what will happen to actors like me? Poor Ned. Ned is Ned or Edward Shutter, as I mentioned. So Ned and I are dead to all intents. We are almost dead. We cannot survive. Why? Because we would as soon speak Greek as sentiments. You can teach us Greek. We would rather learn Greek, We could easier learn Greek than we could learn to exhibit sentiments on stage. It's not a cup of tea. Both nervous groan to keep our spirits up. We now and then take down a hearty cup. What shall we do if comedy forsake us? They'll turn us out and no one else will take us. So what will happen to us once comedy dies, once, sentimental comedy rules the stage, rules the theater? What will happen to us? No one will take us. So now and then this thought makes us anxious and we drown a hearty cup. So we drink together, we drink our sorrow together, because once comedy goes away, we will lose our livelihood forever. No one else will take us. But why can't I be moral? Let me try. My heart thus pressing, fixed my face and eye, with a sententious look that nothing means. Faces are blocks in sentimental scenes. So, he says, why can't I be moral? Let me try. When so many actors, are being able, they feel that they are capable of performing sentimental scenes on stage. What happens to me? Why am I not able to do it? So let me try. I can also do this. So I'll, just put my hand to my heart. I'll press my heart like this. I'll fix my eye and face with a sententious look, which means nothing, because faces are blocks in sentimental scenes. So basically, this is a satire upon the sentimental comedy, where there was too much of moralizing, too much of melodrama, which meant nothing. So basically, the dialogues of sentimental comedy were full of platitudes. And even I think Richard Steele calls them, he calls sentimental comedies homilies in dialogue. So they are full of, kind of religious sermons, which basically mean nothing. So he says, thus I begin. So having, pressed my heart and having fixed my face and eye with a sententious look, thus I begin. And what do I say? All is not gold that glitters. Pleasures seem sweet, but prove a glass of bitters. When ignorance enters, folly is at hand. Learning is better far than house and land. Let not your virtue trip. Who trips may stumble. And virtue is not virtue if she tumble. So these are kinds of platitudes that would feature in the sentimental comedy. However, these particular lines are taken not from any comedy, but from a poem written by John Dryden. So these are, the kind of sentences which would feature in the dialogues of a sentimental comedy that did not mean much and which did not at all in any way contribute to raising a laugh. I give it up. Morals won't do for me. To make you laugh, I must play tragedy. One hope remains. Hearing the maid was ill, a doctor comes this night to show his skill. To cheer her heart and give your muscles motion. He, in 5 draughts prepared, presents a potion. So this part of the prologue hints to the arrival of Oliver Goldsmith on the stage, who might, act as a doctor for the ailing muse of the comedy. So he says that morals won't do for me. I can only, make you laugh by playing tragedy. However, there is one hope. We have finally found a doctor. A doctor comes this night to show his skill. to cheer her heart and give your muscles motion. So there is, a possibility of the comedy being revived. There is a doctor who in 5 draughts, that is in 5 acts, he has prepared a medicine, he has prepared a potion that would contribute to the revival of the comedy perhaps. A kind of magic charm, for be assured, if you will swallow it, the maid is cured. So this is an experiment. This is on an experimental basis that the doctor, has prepared a potion. And if it goes well with the audience, if you swallow it, if you swallow this magic charm, then the maid is cured. So if the play the entire success of the play depends upon the reaction of the audience. So if the audience says yes, if the play goes down well with them, the muse is revived. So if you will swallow it, the maid is cured. But desperate the doctor and her case is, if you reject the dose and make wry faces. So, however, things could be the other way round. And if you reject this dose, if you make wry faces after drinking the medicine, the chances are that the doctor will fail. This truth he boasts, will boast it while he lives. No poisonous drugs are mixed in what he gives. So this doctor makes just one assertion, and that is, his comedy is not spurious, his comedy is not adulterated. So there are no poisonous drugs mixed in what he's offering. So this is comedy, pure, unadulterated, comedy which has completely, dissociated itself from the sentimentalism which is prevailing at that time on the stage. Should he succeed, you will give him his degree. If not, within he will receive no fee. So should the dramatist succeed, you have to accept his success. You have to acknowledge his success. You have to applaud for him. And if you do not do that, he will never be satisfied with what he has done. Within he will receive no fee. So satisfaction, will elude him if you are not satisfied with his efforts. The college, you must his pretensions back. Pronounce him regular or dub him quack. So you, that is the audience, are the testing nerve. You will constitute, the point at which the tragedy, at which the comedy, at which this doctor sails or fails. So if you acknowledge him, if you acknowledge the power of his medicine, the potency of his medicine, he succeeds. So it is you, who have to decide. It's the audience that will decide tonight whether this is a regular doctor, that is whether he's a skilled doctor, a capable doctor, or whether he's just a quack. He's a dishonest man pretending to be a doctor. So this is where, the prologue ends, and we can enter then from here into the play proper. So you realize that the prologue has brought into context all the possibilities of, the reception of the play. So the play could be well received. The play has certain chances of being well received because the audience is supposed to, the audience is already informed before this of the weaknesses of the sentimental comedy. So it's a satire on the sentimental comedy. It is a hope for the revival of the pure comedy, of the uncomplicated comedy, or of the laughing comedy, as Goldsmith calls it. And in every way, we believe that Goldsmith's attempts have been fulfilled by the kind of play that he has produced. So this is, I believe, a convenient point where we can stop today. And your homework would be to go through the text of the play so that in our next lectures, we could maybe classify our lectures on the basis of plot and thematic study and a study of dialogue and language and so on. So it is important that you do the text of the play at home, because we may not be in a position, to cover the text together as we might have done in the classroom. So please read the text, and probably in a couple of days we should be ready to talk about the themes that Goldsmith brings for us. So please, while reading the text, pay attention to the elements of humor, pay attention to the misinterpretations in the text, the misrepresentation of the characters. Please pay attention to the various linguistic registers that are at work in the play. So you have Marlowe himself speaking in two different registers. So there is the genteel woman, the genteel lady Kate, whom he addresses in a specific register, and then he would be addressing Kate as the barmaid in another register. So please take into account these different linguistic registers that are at work in the play, because they contribute very, very significantly to the humor and to the to the comic effect of the play. Please also note the instances of dramatic irony in the play, the irony in dialogues, the irony in situations, which will help you to appreciate the humor better. So I think we stop here. I hope that you make best use of your lockdown time to to do everything that you have been waiting to do, you have been wanting to do, but we're always running short of time. So I don't think that post-lockdown we would ever be able to complain of not having had enough time for something. So please enjoy yourself, take care of everybody around you, stay safe, and hope to catch you again soon. Thank you so much.